Hello. Mendel's work on peas has revolutionized, at least later in his lifetime, the way we understand about the inheritance itself of the characteristics, traits. He worked on peas and he worked especially on 7 of these traits, incidentally or it's by luck. Each of these traits happen to be on different chromosomes, and that is why he was able to come up with something called as the law of independent assortment. If these traits happen to be on the same chromosome like this, then it would have been difficult. Nevertheless, we owe him a lot of credit or gratitude, in the sense that there was no idea about the molecular factors or even much of cells about how these traits are inherited by the next generation. I am Dr. BCMR, Assistant Professor at Shastra. Now we will discuss about the law of independent assortment. Here we are going to discuss about dihybrid, which would mean that we are going to discuss about 2 different traits. When we discussed about law of segregation, we discussed about monohybrid, in the sense a hybrid of alleles of a single trait. Here we have 2 different traits, and there we will see about the hybrids there. So if we took an organism which has about 4 chromosomes, it's 2n, diploid. So assume that there is a capital R and a small r, say for round, and this is for yellow. The opposite would have been wrinkled for round, and the recessive traits, here it would have been green. So there are 4 different chromosomes. These 2 we call them as homologous chromosomes. These 2 are another homologous chromosomes. There is capital R and small r, and capital Y and small y. The same is there for another individual. So during gametogenesis, haploid cells form. They are n. They only have 1 set. So they have to inherit one set from one of the R's and one from the Y or green. Say, in that sense, we can have many different combinations. Let's see what are possible during the combinations of these during gametogenesis. If we have something like this and Y and Y, during gametogenesis we need to have one of it for the shape of the individual, the seed, and one for the color. So it would have been RY, capital R, capital Y, here capital R, small y, small r, capital Y, and small r and small y. So as we can see, there are 4 different types of gametes that can form in this scenario. So the point of independent assortment is to say that it's not always that capital R would always go along with capital Y, or small r will always go with capital Y. The alleles, the genes here can have a capital Y or small y. Similarly, small r can have a capital Y or small y. The genes are independent of each other, and they can assort into the gametes as in any of these ways combinations. That is essentially the law of independent assortment. By going through a dihybrid cross and drawing up a Finite square, we can actually understand it much better. Say, before going there, we also want to have a discussion about a little bit of combinations that are possible. In terms of shape and in terms of color, phenotypically we have round and wrinkled. Round could be if we are talking about diploid state, it could be capital R and capital R, and there is also another possibility is capital R and small r. Even in heterozygous, because round is dominant, it would show up. For the wrinkled one, it would have been small r, small r. Similarly, for the color, we can have homozygous yellow, yellow, capital Y, or heterozygous like this. Or it could be green when it is homozygous for small y. So phenotypically, if we can see it this way, or genotypically. So basically, we have these all combinations, and these are the combinations. So for shape, we have three different two phenotypes, that is green and wrinkled, and in genotype wise we have three of them. Similarly, for color, we have two different varieties, that is, it could be yellow or green, and genotypes we have three of them. How many combinations could form here would be 3 into 3 would be 9 different combinations are possible. Just let's write it up a little bit so that it will be clearer, and it will help us understand things better in the later times. RR, capital R, small r, small r, small r. So I'm going to write the opposite, that is on the other side, I'm going to write the combination for the other one. This is when progeny is forming in the F1 generation or F2 generation. If we are taking heterozygous parents, then what are the possibilities? That is what we are trying to look at. So we may have a combination of this or this or this one. Similarly, we may have combination of capital R, small r with any of these three traits, and so on. So what are the total number of possibilities? If we are considering two different traits with two different alleles each, then we have about 9 possible combinations. So we'll now try to solve a Finite Square through Finite Square. So this is the parent generation. We have taken homozygous capital Y, capital R, so it is yellow and round, and we have crossed it with a recessive parent, homozygous recessive, that is this way for both the traits, shape, color of the seed as well as the shape. And then in the F1 generation, we would get all of them would be heterozygous capital Y, capital R, small r. That is because if we had something like this and this way, the gametes that this parent would form all of them would be something like this. And if there is no other variety here in each of these cases, and when these two fuse upon fertilization would give something like this: capital Y, capital R, and small r. This is F1 generation. This is where we are. All of them would be yellow and round. Now if we are allowing it to cross within, we have a cross of F1 generations. Now we will have a lot of difference in terms of the number of gametes or types of gametes that it could form. They would be essentially, if we see, we can, as we discussed in the previous one, we would have Y, and we also have R and R. So we have 4 different types of gametes that would form. They would be capital Y, capital R, capital Y, small y, capital R, and small y and small r. That is exactly what is shown here. So this is from a heterozygous parent, that is from the F1 generation, and on this side you would also see another gametes that are derived from another parent. And now if fertilization occurred randomly, we could we would get something like this. We could easily write it down based on what is here and what is here. We combine these two and we get what is in this case. That is how we can write it out, and we can determine the phenotypic ratio as well as genotypic ratio. From this figure, it is actually easy to identify that we have 9 of them are yellow and round, because yellow and round will be predominant because they are the dominant features. Having even one Y, capital Y, or one capital R will determine yellow and round, followed by green and round, and followed by yellow and wrinkled, and then the recessive character will be very less, that is only 1. It is about 9:3:3:3:1. That is the phenotypic ratio. Memorizing the ratio by itself is not so useful unless we are making it very explicit that yellow and round is to green and round is to yellow wrinkled and green wrinkled. This is when the whole ratio will become much more sensible. So if we are going to make a genotypic ratio, that is going to get a little more complicated, and memorizing the ratio again is not as important as much as it is more important to be able to derive it. So I have already worked it out so that it will be easier for me to explain. And so here is the same the output that we have gotten from the Finite Square in the previous slide, and now I have arranged them into based on the different types of genotypes. This is capital R, capital Y, capital Y, capital R, capital R. That is one of it. Capital Y, small y, capital R, capital R. There are 2 of them. Similarly, if you keep on writing those, it will be easier to find out this way. So how many combinations are we expecting? As we discussed before in the previous slide, 9 combinations should have been there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Total number of how many portions are we looking at? If you remember from the square, 4 into 4, that would be 16. And here we have 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 and 16. This is the ratio. You might go into different other papers or resources, and you might find a variation to this, but the number would remain the total number would remain the same. The important thing then would be to memorize not just the numbers, but also the combination, possible combination there. Only then it would make sense here. So how much would you have this? Y, capital Y, capital Y, capital R will be one of them, and similarly say capital Y, small y, capital R would be 2 portions of it, ratio wise. Let's do a quick problem and see if we can make it up. The question is, in a dihybrid cross experiment involving 2 dominant independently assorting traits, round and yellow, which follow classic Mendelian principles of inheritance, a researcher found 809 plants that exhibited wrinkled and green pods, the recessive traits. Approximately how many are genotypically homozygous for round and yellow pods? So basically, if we are considering that the F1 generation is a heterozygous, like we discussed, and there is a cross between F1 generation plants, and it says that 809 plants exhibited wrinkle and green pods. That would be yellow and wrinkled, that is this one. If these are 8 not 9, so let's write the ratio again. 1, this is 1 2 2, this is 4 1 2 1 2 1. So if we have 8 not 9 in this case in an experiment, then how many would be homozygous for round and yellow? Homozygous for round and yellow would be this one. This is a straightforward question, right? So if you didn't remember the ratio, you might actually work out the Finite Square like it is given here, and from there you can always answer the question. If we found 8 not 9 homozygous recessive, then we would have 8 not 9, approximately 8 not 9 homozygous dominant traits. This is an easy question to ask, but if somebody were to ask you how many plant seeds would you expect them to be heterozygous yellow and heterozygous round, then what would you answer? In that case, it's always important to draw up the Finite Square, and then everything else would become much more easier to solve. I hope you enjoyed the question. You can always try variants to these questions and share among your friends and try to discuss it more. Thank you very much. Have fun.